Hello, my amazing friend. The city of Chicago was alive with jazz, shadows, and secrets. In the smoky corners of speakeasies, men whispered one name with both fear and respect: Al Capone. He wasn't just a man. He was power wrapped in silk suits and cold eyes. While the world danced through the roaring 20s, he built an empire from illegal whiskey, blood-soaked streets, and money that couldn't be counted fast enough. This is not just the story of a gangster. It's the story of how a poor boy from Brooklyn rose to become the most feared man in America, and how everything he built came crashing down. Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born on January 17, 1899, in the rough neighborhoods of Brooklyn, New York. His parents had sailed from Italy with dreams of a better life, bringing with them strong hands, old traditions, and hope. His father, Gabriele, worked hard as a barber. His mother, Teresa, kept the home and raised 9 children. The Capone house was loud, poor, and full of ambition. Al was bright, too bright for the world he was born into. He showed signs of leadership early, but something in him burned against rules. He didn't like being told what to do. He got into fights. He skipped school. And one day, at just 14 years old, a teacher hit him, and Al hit back. He was expelled that day and never returned. He didn't need books anymore. The streets had become his new classroom, and in that classroom, the strongest survived. Brooklyn was crawling with gangs. Boys joined them not just for fun, but for protection, identity, and a shot at something more. Al found his place in the 5 Points Gang, one of the most feared groups in the city. They taught him how to fight, steal, and survive. But more importantly, they taught him how to rise. His mentor, Johnny Torrio, saw something in the young Capone, a fire, a cleverness, a charm, and took him under his wing. One night, working as a bouncer at a bar, Al made a mistake. He insulted a woman. Her brother didn't forgive it. He slashed Al's face with a knife, leaving 3 scars down his cheek. That wound became part of his legend. People began calling him Scarface. Al hated the name. He tried to cover it with powder, but it stuck. And in the world he was entering, scars were badges of war. In 1919, Torrio moved to Chicago, where crime was bigger and more organized. He worked for a man named Big Jim Colosimo, running prostitution rings and gambling dens. He called for Capone to join him. Al was just 20 years old when he stepped off the train in Chicago, but behind his eyes was a storm already building. Chicago was a city on the edge. Immigrants poured in, industry boomed, and neighborhoods were divided by language, crime, and power. Capone learned fast. He became Torrio's enforcer, making threats, collecting debts, and handling anyone who got in the way. But something bigger was about to happen, something that would change crime in America forever. In 1920, the United States passed the Volstead Act. Prohibition had begun. Alcohol was now illegal. But people still wanted to drink, maybe more than ever before. And into that empty glass, Capone poured whiskey and built an empire. With Torrio at the top and Capone running operations, they opened hundreds of secret bars known as speakeasies. They smuggled alcohol from Canada. They bribed police officers, judges, and even politicians. In just a few years, their business was worth millions. They didn't just sell liquor, they sold power, and Chicago bought it. But crime brings blood. Rival gangs began fighting for territory. Streets became war zones. In 1925, Torrio was shot outside his home. He survived, but barely. He saw what was coming. So he retired. Quietly. and handed the entire operation to Al Capone. At just 26 years old, Capone became the king of Chicago. He moved into a luxurious hotel called the Lexington. He wore custom suits, Italian shoes, and diamond rings. He gave interviews to newspapers, posed for photos, and built a public image as a generous businessman. He gave money to the poor. He funded soup kitchens during the Great Depression. Some people loved him. To them, he wasn't a criminal. He was a modern-day Robin Hood. But behind the charm was a violent heart. Capone ruled with fear. If someone refused to pay for protection, their store burned down. If a politician voted the wrong way, he disappeared. If a rival gang stepped too close, Capone struck first, hard. His enemies were many, but he struck with precision. One of the bloodiest days in Chicago history came on February 14, 1929, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. 7 men from a rival gang were lined up against a brick wall and executed. The killers wore police uniforms. Machine guns echoed through the city. Though Capone was never officially linked, everyone believed he gave the order. The message was clear. No one crosses Capone. He became untouchable, or so it seemed. But in the shadows, someone was watching. A young federal agent named Elliot Ness had been assigned to bring Capone down. Ness gathered a small group of agents who couldn't be bribed. They called themselves the Untouchables. Day by day, they shut down Capone's breweries. They arrested his men. They hid his wallet. But even they couldn't find a way to charge him directly. He had too many shields. The government needed another way, and they found it, not in bullets, but in numbers. Capone had made millions, but he never paid taxes. And that, finally, became his weakness. In 1931, Al Capone was arrested for tax evasion. The trial was national news. The man who once ruled Chicago sat in a courtroom, trying to smile, trying to charm the jury. But it didn't work. He was found guilty and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. At first, he was sent to Atlanta. Even there, he lived like a king. Soft bed, private cell, and all the comforts money could buy. But the government knew it wasn't enough. They transferred him to Alcatraz, the island prison in San Francisco Bay. Cold, isolated, inescapable. On Alcatraz, Capone was no longer a king. He was just a number, inmate 85. The disease he had carried for years, syphilis, began to eat away at his brain. He grew confused, angry, lost. He played the banjo in the prison band. He mopped floors. He talked to people who weren't there. By the time he was released in 1939, he was a shadow of the man he once was. He moved to a quiet mansion in Florida. The press still followed him, but he no longer gave interviews. He fished. He walked slowly. He often sat alone for hours, staring at nothing. On January 25, 1947, Al Capone died from a stroke and pneumonia. He was just 48 years old. The world barely noticed. There was no parade, no crowds, just a small funeral. A quiet end to a life that had once shaken the nation. Capone had built his empire on fear, charm, and crime. But in the end, it all slipped through his fingers. His story is a warning, a mirror held up to power and pride. He was smart. He was bold. He had everything, except peace. He once ruled a city, but couldn't escape his past. And now, my friend, you've heard the whole story. Thank you for listening. Thank you for learning. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. More powerful, emotional, real English stories are waiting for you. Only here with your friend.